It's one thing to complain about the economy. Anybody can do that. But what should be done to fix it? People who've been reading my stuff for the last 5 years will know that I've come to believe that this is a managed depression that we're in, and that only a fundamental restructuring of the economy will end it. The economy will restructure itself, but everything we can do to move that process along gets us through the process a lot quicker. So how do we do that? I have 6 ideas that I'd like to throw out, that bit of a plan, the actions that the federal government can take to move the restructuring ahead. Now, this isn't just about creating jobs. It's actually about how do we change the economy and allow the free market the room it needs to find its way to whatever the new economy is going to be that's going to take us off into the future. The first one is what I call the generational shift, have a big short-term payoff. The best way to create jobs right away is a one-time program to allow workers over a certain age, say 55, to retire with full Social Security benefits and access to their 401k tax-free. What this would do is turn the economy over to the next generation, which by many records, people under 30 have underemployment rates as high as 40%. That means we're losing an entire generation to part-time jobs and piecework. That's not good. Turning everything over to the next generation with their different skills and energy would help revitalize the economy and get money back into people who need it desperately. This program is very flexible in cost, but if you spend, say, $48 billion a year, or about $240 billion over 5 years, you could get enough people to retire that would open up jobs for younger people and probably save most of that money in reduced unemployment benefits to those who are already employed. Another thing that's extremely important is to implement the Simpson-Bowles framework in Congress. Now, the Simpson-Bowles plan is proposed by former Senator Alan Simpson and Budget Director Erskine Bowles, a Democrat and Republican, as a way of approaching the federal budget that we have. Basically, throw out everything and start over again from scratch. Write a new tax code without all the loopholes. Congress has to find a way to manage the budget, and that's what the Simpson-Bowles framework is all about. And it really is just a framework. What is important to the general economy, because it would instill greater confidence in our government. And the Simpson-Bowles has at its core dramatic tax simplification. It also calls for reductions in military spending, which would free up a tremendous amount of money. We spend over $700 billion a year on military at this point. And by doing that, we would have money to spend things on critical items such as infrastructure, which we'll talk about later. Another extremely important thing we can do is to reduce the overhead per employee. Wages are not the only cost of workers. Employees also carry overhead that includes health care, vacation, sick pay, training, vacation costs, recruitment, and of course 7.62% FICA tax as well. Why employers are stuck with the cost of health care in our system, I will never understand. That's a huge part of the burden. Every HR department, by the way, is also nothing but pure overhead. The exact cost of this overhead per employee is not known, but it seems to run at least 30 to 40% for smaller operations and 60% or more for manufacturing operations. General Motors used to use a figure of 105% of all wages. That means that somebody that earns $20 an hour, or about $40,000 a year, would cost General Motors more like $80,000 to keep that employee around. Where we are as an average, no one actually knows. We need to study the problem first, but somewhere in the 45 to 50% range seems to be an average. So, a national initiative to first quantify the overhead per employee, analyze the sources of it, and then suggest practices and the way we tax things and look at things in the federal government should have a target of reducing that by about 1/3. If that 1/3 of the overhead was about 15% of the total wages paid, and we split it, say corporations get half, and the other half they're going to use to hire more people, guess what? That would take care of our unemployment problem pretty much overnight. Another thing that's extremely critical is transparency in securities. Now, many obscure securities, which is to say stocks and bonds and derivatives, are not traded in public. Precise figures are hard to come by, particularly when you're talking about credit default swaps, a kind of insurance. This network of shady investments has made risk management extremely difficult, and that's threatening the long-term stability of our finance markets. as it diverts money away from investment in more tangible resources. The simplest regulation of all is to require they be traded openly and reported. We might need a lot more regulations than that, but that is where we absolutely have to start. And all finance companies should be part of an insurance pool modeled after the FDIC, the organization that can move in and take over a bank very quickly, just over a weekend for sure. This will not help the economy directly, but it will improve investor confidence and probably improve investment in the economy overall. Another thing that I think is critical to restructuring the economy are what I call challenge grants. Our economy will not transform until we have a handle on our balance of trade, and the single biggest part of our balance of trade issue is the amount of money that we spend on energy imports. A series of challenge grants to develop key technology that will first bring us energy independence and then sustainable energy is critical to our long-term economic health. The same mechanisms might be useful in transforming healthcare, reducing overhead per employee, and other things we've talked about. A tremendous amount can be done in just 5 years with a few $billions through challenge grants, where a prize is offered to whoever can solve a specific problem first. $10 million here or there, it's not much to the federal government, but it makes a great prize. And we can do this in areas where technology can help us transform the economy. Last, we have investment in infrastructure. The U.S. has a $1 to $2 trillion deficit in infrastructure, meaning that we need to invest a lot more in rails, pipes, dams, and so on to get ourselves up to what we call good condition. Exactly how this would be paid for is very unclear, given that this is usually a state cost, sometimes shared 50-50 with the feds, and the states are pretty much tapped out. But the investment of $1 trillion over 5 years would provide jobs in the short term, but more importantly, would give us an opportunity to transform key parts of our economy, which includes transportation, things like high-speed rail. It's extremely expensive, but it's essential. A solid method of tracking the deficit must be developed and implemented ahead of time, though, and that's where the Simpson-Bowles framework becomes important. And those are my 6 basic ideas for not just creating jobs, but for transforming the economy and getting us through the managed depression. It contains some things that may work in the short term, some medium-term things, and some long-term items. It's far from complete, of course, but these are the 6 things I can think of that aren't generally discussed. What are your ideas? What do you think the next economy might look like? And more importantly, what is the role of a government in getting us to there in a free market?